Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a safe place for leading with your heart. Hey, thanks for being here. You, Me, Empathy is the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective, a collaborative mental health community designed to empower each of us to grow our capacity for empathy, vulnerability, and emotional wayfinding. Just a friendly reminder that this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. No one is just a silly boy with a feely heart. You can support the show by leaving a review in Apple Podcasts, following us on social media at Yumi Empathy and Feely Human, and joining the Feely Human Collective community at feelyhuman.co. And now your host, Known Wells.
Hello, Feely Humans. Welcome to another episode of You, Me, Empathy. My name is Known Wells, and this is episode 203 on Forever is a Long Time with my guest, Ian Coss. In this episode, Ian and I explore the courage and vulnerability of clarifying what you want within and without a relationship, whether we're doomed to repeat the same patterns of our parents' relationships, the structural and societal problems of the institution of marriage, and Ian's amazing new podcast project on marriage and divorce called Forever is a Long Time. It's a great show. It's a limited series. It's called Forever is a Long Time. Subscribe, go listen. It's wonderful. Really enjoyed this conversation. It's something that really hasn't been explored on this show, relationships and what they mean. And I had a lot of fun. Before we get to the episode, though, a couple of things. One is that on Thursday, December 2nd of this week, the next workshop for Feely Human is happening. It's called Build Your Seasonal Self-Care Survival Kit. We've done it before, but this time for the wintry season. It's led by my friend Rebecca Haas, and I will be hosting, and it's $15 to join. Hope you can make it. You can learn more about that at feelyhuman.co. Again, let's build up our self-care toolkits, our survival kits for the rest of the year. Again, that's at feelyhuman.co. Go to the workshops tab. It's called Build Your Seasonal Self-Care Survival Kit. That is Thursday, December 2nd at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Hope to see you there. The other thing is that, as a reminder, the rest of the year, I am doing a buy one, get one free on all things Feely Human shop. That means shirts and pins and stickers and mugs. So if you want to buy something for a friend or yourself, or buy something for yourself, and then you get something for your friend or partner or whomever for free. And every purchase through the Feely Human shop does support me and the work that I do in this podcast and growing the Feely Human Collective. So check that out at feelyhuman.co/shop. And the last thing is that if you haven't left a rating and review for this podcast, please do. It does help out the show. I love reading them. It makes me happy. It reminds me that I'm doing something that is important and meaningful. And, I get lonely and I get isolated and I'm doing this thing. And sometimes I feel like I'm just yapping away into the ether. So remind me of why I'm doing this. Let me know what you think about this show, what it means to you, what it means for your mental health and your empathy journey. Thank you. And let's do it. Let's get to the episode with my guest, Ian Coss, on Forever is a Long Time.
La 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 la, you.
Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective. On this show, we explore the struggles, the triumphs, the brights, and the darks we face as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration. I'm just going to leave that in. I'm tired. I stumbled over my words. I'm just going to leave that in. Cognitive collaboration and insight so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. You, Me, Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, I'd be honored to be here forever with composer, sound designer, and podcast producer at PRX, Radiotopia, and creator of the new podcast, Forever is a Long Time. It's Ian Coss. Hello, Ian.
Hey there. It's good to be here.
Good to have you, friend. So,
and I'm glad that you just, you own the mistakes or stumbles in the opening.
Oh, yeah.
You don't need to take the time to edit out those.
Editing. Who wants it?
Who needs it?
It's a bore. Yeah, I feel that.
People, the straight thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I joke, but like, I also don't do a lot of editing because, frankly, I have a weekly show and I have a day job and I'm trying to run a business and I like authenticity. And unless someone says like, hey, cut that out, I'm pretty much going to leave everything in other than, long pauses or bathroom breaks or whatever.
All right. I'll try not to ramble too long then.
No, you're fine. You're good. I welcome you and all of your fallibility.
Thanks.
So let's kick off the show with an emotional check-in, Ian. How are you feeling?
How am I feeling today? I'm feeling in a sort of, very narrow in my world space house bubble. I'm feeling pretty good. COVID has like reignited my Red Sox baseball fandom, which is something that is sort of like comes in cycles, and it became just something to do every day during the last year when things to do were somewhat curtailed.
Sure.
And we were recording this in early October, and the Red Sox made it into the playoffs last night. So I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Wow. That is exciting.
I'm not sure if that was the spirit you intended the question, but that's where I am right now. I'm feeling pretty good about the world, this corner of the world, at least, that I inhabit.
So you are in the Boston area then, I presume?
Yeah, I live in a city called Medford, just outside of Boston.
Yeah, nice. I used to follow baseball a bit. I played soccer for many years. I was sort of the one sport I had any interest in. And I did enjoy like watching baseball, going to the baseball parks and whatnot. Even like after college, taking a road trip and went to like all of the stadiums, not all of the stadiums, but just a lot of them, including Fenway. And there is something, I don't know, nostalgic, magical. Maybe it's all The Sandlot, the movie. That's the fault of The Sandlot. I don't know, but I haven't watched in years, and I don't know how I'd find the time.
I think part of what drew me back to baseball was the radio, and as I began working more in radio and audio production, I kind of became enamored and awed again with just the elegance and kind of artfulness of baseball on the radio. It's just, it is, I think of it really as the ultimate radio game. And, just the language that announcers, create around just, describing plays and things that sort of drew me back in. And then you can just put it on. There's just background noise most of the year.
Is that something you aspire to do? Like be a baseball announcer on the radio?
Oh, no, I don't think I understand the game well enough or have the personality for it or anything.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate them as audio makers and artists.
Uh-huh. Did you play baseball as a kid?
Not really. Maybe a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I played frisbee. I was that kind of kid.
Okay.
Frisbee.
Nice. So you were maybe also playing with a hacky sack at some point?
Um,
Or is that more West Coast?
yeah, I guess maybe the East Coast frisbee vibe is a little different. I certainly see that, there's an affinity, a cultural affinity there between the frisbee crowd and the hacky sack crowd. But that wasn't me. I was more of um, I went to kind of an artsy school. It was actually a performing arts charter school
Oh, wow.
in the western part of Massachusetts, and there were no sports teams other than an ultimate frisbee team and a mock trial team. Those were the two like competitive activities. Period.
Wow.
Um,
This was a high school?
yeah, it was a high school,
Wow. Oh.
so I was into like playing in the rock band, being in the musical, and playing frisbee.
That's
Those are
great.
sort of my overlapping, intersecting young adult interests.
I mean, would you say you still have some of those interests?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, is it apply to like the work you do now as a sort of podcast producer and, radio guy?
Yeah, I mean, I came to making narrative audio and documentary audio through music. That was my entry point into just audio making as a world. That's why I have this microphone I'm talking into, and that's why I had the tools and interest and aptitude, I guess, to explore that world. So yeah, music has always been a big part of what I love about making and listening to audio, which comes out, of course, in the project I released recently. Is in some ways, a chance for me to really bring those worlds together and use the songwriting piece to, the music and the songwriting to get at parts of these stories and feelings and experiences that are harder to get at just in words.
I appreciate that so much. I think about and talk a lot about, I'm a book nerd. I read a ton, and I think story and it, can sort of is a bridge to empathy and feeling and all of these things. And so many other mediums are, right? Music can be, other things. And I'm always sort of suspect or maybe a little critical of folks who sort of say, this is the way to truth, or this is how you do it, but like the truth is, as there's so many ways into truth. It could be through music. It could be all of the above, right? A cross section of them all, which is the beautiful thing about life.
Yeah, I think with music in particular and songwriting, I feel like I have a very, just like shifting relationship with truth in songs. I feel like if, when you write a song and you put it out into the world, there's this sort of baseline assumption that it's somehow autobiographical, or that everything you say in there is like about you or true, or that you believe it fully. But for me, songwriting is always kind of like rooted in experience or autobiography, things I'm feeling. But in a way, it's like, it's not just like a release valve, but it's like a way to explore thoughts and feelings that I have that it is a little safer and less declarative. And I can sort of take a feeling, maybe it's like a fleeting momentary feeling, an anxiety I have, a doubt I have, and sort of run with it and see where it goes. And so then I often feel like the songs I write are sort of like, they represent kind of fleeting moments, or they're like exaggerations of thoughts and feelings I've had, or just, refracted angles of feelings. There's always something true or real if we accept that as, a starting point, but it's the way it comes out does not always feel literally true or real in the same way.
Of course. You're testing the waters. You're dipping your toes in a little bit
exactly.
to sort of explore. And I think that's beautiful. I think safe was the word that I was sort of conjuring up in my mind, and then you said it, and that feels right. Like that feels like how it should be in a way, right? Because we are all humans processing big and hard things all the time, and if we're always sort of like so literal with things or so sort of out front with it, it can be dangerous. It cannot be safe, right?
Yeah. And I had, and I think, people who write fiction, novels, all kinds of art forms can function the same way. But I had experiences with this project where I was working on the music, and I would, I had this one kind of funny experience where I wrote this song that is featured in the podcast. It's sort of, essentially exploring a hypothetical divorce from a first person perspective. And I had sent it to a friend of mine, a musician who I was hoping to work with on the project, and he wrote back to me. It's like, oh man, I'm so sorry to hear this. Like, if you ever need to talk, like this sounds really rough. And I'm like, well, I'm not actually getting divorced. It's there's like this there's that tendency to take things literally. The feeling is real, but the literal details are not necessarily.
Yeah. So let's talk about this project. You reach out to me, and one of the things that, there was a lot that struck me as interesting about the project and is interesting about the project. And I want to start with, you had said, I think in your initial email, you used the word, the institution of marriage. And I just wonder, like, when you hear that phrase, institution of marriage, like what comes up for you?
Yeah. The institution of marriage. I think of marriage as, I think the reason I use that word institution is to kind of remind myself that it is not, the intent and meaning behind marriage is kind of separate. That's something that like we put on it, and we can put on it whatever intention we want or come to it with whatever bring to it whatever feelings or meaning we have. But underneath that, there is this sort of legal, historical, religious institution that we're taking as a starting point. And obviously it's like flawed and contradictory and problematic in all kinds of ways. But we, for whatever reason, those of us who choose to buy into that institution for reasons personal or financial or religious, whatever it is, we start with that institution, and then we try to kind of work it, shape it into something that actually feels meaningful, impactful to ourselves, to our partners. So I think that's where I come from in using that word, describing it as an institution.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And that's the way I think about it. It feels to me, speaking from sort of my perspective on it, marriage is like, I speaking of religion, I was raised in an environment where it was like family values, and marriage is like this value, right? And like you commit, and, no matter what happens, like even if, my father like cheated on my mom for 30 years and was abusive and terrible, and they stayed married because that's what, God wants, right? So there's a lot of, that's the sort of perversion of it that you were referencing. And so I with my wife, and I've been married for over 11 years now, I maybe use the word commitment, right? And even that is kind of loaded in some ways. And I think it's all sort of up to us in regards to like how we face it and how we define it, to your point. So you're a married person, right?
I am.
How long have you been married?
Almost exactly 6 years. My our wedding anniversary is next week.
Okay. And prior to getting married, did you have any sort of doubts, skepticism, sort of cold feet, etc.?
I did. And this is something that, I explore in the show is that for me, the institution of marriage didn't mean all that much coming as I approached the possibility of getting married myself, largely because the model of marriage that I had around me in my family simply wasn't all that encouraging. I come from one of those not so uncommon families where divorce is pretty much the norm.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for a lot of my generation, perhaps our generation, growing up in this world where for many reasons and many good reasons, divorce had become much more accessible and widespread. And so for me, I had a lot of doubts about whether I would ever get married or whether that meant anything to me, because just it hadn't meant that much in my life up to that point. And my partner comes from a very different family where marriages tend to be actually pretty strong and rooted in mutual support and companionship and building meaningful lives together. And she saw a lot of value in that institution. So that was actually something we had to navigate together as we decided to get married, of just what marriage meant to us and why we do it. And it's something, and my wife, Kelsey, is prominently featured in the podcast as well. The way it's formatted is I sort of interview my family members about each of their stories of divorce, and then I play those conversations back to my own partner as a sort of a starting point for our own conversation about, what can we learn from this, and how can we maybe apply this to our own relationship. And I think, one of the things I took away, after having all these conversations and exploring these often problematic and ultimately not long lasting or not forever lasting marriages, is that, I actually gained, in a weird way, in exploring the divorces of my family, I think gained an appreciation for what marriage is and what it has meant to my partner and I. And ultimately what that is for me is a kind of like, by being deliberate, by stopping and, really recognizing that this is something that we want to last forever. That step in and of itself required of me, at least, a kind of care and attention that I'm not sure I would have brought in the same focused way if we had simply just continued dating for 8-10 years.
Sure. Interesting.
And I think in a way, doing this project is another way of tending to my own relationship and tending to my feelings about marriage and sort of refinding what it is that I find meaningful in that decision.
Yeah. Yeah, I love, that's beautifully said. And I will just say to you, Ian, and to the listeners, I have listened to a bit of Forever is a Long Time, and it's wonderful. It's great. It's like a really interesting look at relationship, and I appreciated the vulnerability and the honesty throughout. It was a really interesting project that I'm going to try to convince to my wife to listen to with me.
Oh, interesting.
But I've
heard from a few partners who have listened to it together.
Oh yeah? What has been the feedback?
I talked to this one person who said that she and her partner did what's it called in the Catholic Church before you get married? You do pre-cana. Is that what it's called?
I'm not sure.
It's this form of like pre-marriage, not quite counseling, but it's sort of a consultation.
Okay, yeah, I've heard about this. Yeah,
And she said that she and her partner had done that, and listening to the show together was much more productive. So
There you go.
I
Look
got
at
one on the
you.
Catholic Church.
Yeah, you're one up on the Catholic Church. I think we're all one up on the Catholic Church, to be very clear. But what's interesting about it, what sort of comes up as you're speaking was one thing or two things, which is one being when you think about sort of that word marriage, there
Mhm.
is that forever sort of
Yeah.
encased in it. It's like implied, right? And I think that piece of it is a little problematic and maybe cultural, and the religious sort of connotation of it, right? That can be
Yeah.
problematic because I joke with Jessica, my partner, all the time, and I say, "Oh, we've had a great run. Like it's been great," and it's true. We've had a great run. I have no intention of divorcing her. We're doing great. And like if we for some reason divorced today, like I would feel deeply depressed, but I would also feel good about like this relationship we
Right.
built because to the other point, so there's that time element. The other point that I was thinking about, which is the choosing aspect, like you choosing your partner, me choosing my partner, does like that's a big responsibility, right? I'm making a choice here. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing all that you are,
Yeah.
right? And there is an implication that we're going to be in this for a long term, right? And that's scary and vulnerable and takes courage, right? And it's also clarifying what you want, which is, I think, the path of living, right? Is like it's always trying to clarify what we are and what we're about and what fills us up. And I think that's just a piece of it.
Although sometimes when I step back and consider the idea that at age 20 whatever, I felt like I knew what I wanted for the rest of my life. There's a
Sure.
good amount of hubris in that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that gets back to what you're just saying about, if you have a great run and you're really good for each other for 10 years or 5 years or 30 years, whatever it is, and then it's no longer right, then that's not necessarily a failure of the marriage. And that way of looking at it, that's like a way of thinking that I kind of came to through having these conversations. I think I really began with sort of like a failure mindset of, divorce equals the failure of marriage. And yet in hearing the stories of my family, I'm actually like really inspired by, I'm much more inspired by their choices, by like the integrity to themselves and the courage that it took to get divorced than I am by, whatever reasoning or thinking went into the choice to get married in a lot of cases, so,
I think you're
I
right.
think it's something that I've come to see less and less and so as like a failure or negative, but as in many ways like a courageous act.
Yeah, both are choosing to and choosing to leave, choosing to marry and choosing to leave, right? Because it is another sort of point of checking in on yourself. It's another point of awareness, really. And like the thought of like, I'm just sort of like in my mind's eye, like thinking at some point, like if my marriage with Jessica is no longer working, that's like devastating to me. And I see it also as like, yeah, that would be tremendously courageous to like say, look, this is not working for me and this is why. Like, I think like that's a thing that should exist in marriage, i.e. open conversation, however hard it is, because as you know, Ian, there's so much in this world that says like, oh, you got to keep staying together and you got to sort of hide those feelings and you got to, sacrifice yourself for others and et cetera, so yeah. Yeah. What, how old were you when your parents divorced?
I was, I think 8 years old. Yeah.
Okay. So pretty young.
Young, and it's kind of a funny age where it's, young enough that I sort of get into this somewhat in the show, but I don't have a lot of really clear memories of it. but old enough that I was definitely aware. I mean, I know some 8-year-olds today. They're very cogent, interactive, aware beings, you know. So
Yeah.
it's kind of in this funny point in your life where you don't. I at least don't retain a lot of like the very clear, literal memories of it, but I know there's a lot I internalized from it.
Hmm.
Um,
I mean, I'd imagine it being pretty hard as an 8-year-old. Like so I mentioned my parents divorced eventually, then they married each
yeah.
other again, and then they divorced again.
Oh wow.
But it wasn't until I was like, I guess the first time was I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
So, they stuck it out for far too long.
Yeah.
But I was out of the house, so it didn't,
Right.
I mean, it was still weird and hard, but as an 8-year-old, yeah. What was going through your little noggin back then?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've reflected on since is, or maybe arrived at since, is a kind of gratitude that they separated when they did. I mean, every case is different. It's hard to know what the counterfactual is, but um, when I look at the families I know where the parents do sort of like really like grit their teeth and stick it out for the kids, um, it doesn't necessarily seem like a better outcome for the kids. And in my case, although the divorce itself, I mean, I know it was a rupture, and the fact that we weren't all living together as a family, and that we had these like 2 houses, and there was some, I don't, we always had a home. I don't want to use the word like housing insecurity, but there was sort of like some housing instability for a time of like people moving a lot, and like one
Sure.
house and then an apartment and then a roommate and then no roommate. And
That's hard.
there was like definitely a period of that, where like the home as a place
Yeah.
took some time to settle. But then with time, I mean, I give my parents a lot of credit. I think they handled, for the most part, as there were some rough patches for sure. But both my parents had, and this is something I learned a lot about in the course of producing this show, both my parents had, pretty traumatic experiences with their own parents' relationships, and their own parents' divorces. In fact, my father was about the same exact age I was when his parents divorced. And it was very hard on him. And I think he carried a lot of that with him in the course of his own divorce, the sort of guilt of repeating that same experience onto his own children. So they were very aware, I think, of us and, how their actions impacted us. My brother and I is the us.
Gotcha.
And I think they made a real effort to shield us from the worst of it, and to not sort of make war on each other through us, through the children, which I think unfortunately is can happen in a lot of cases, including my father's childhood. And ultimately to create really warm, supportive homes separately, to find their own partners. They've both since remarried, and actually my step-parents are a really important part of my family now. They feel like my extended parental units. So
I love that.
in a way, as I said, I'm kind of glad they divorced when they did. Though I also know at the time it was hard for all of us.
Yeah. Are you close with both of them?
My parents, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, they let me interview them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But yes, I am very close with both my parents.
That's
I
wonderful.
love them very much.
How about your brother? Are you close with your brother?
I am, yes. I'm blessed with a really great family.
Nice.
And also I've a number of cousins I'm very close to, aunts and uncles. It's a good group. And I think it's something that my parents were keen to. Both my parents had and have very difficult relationships with their own parents,
Mm-hmm.
and their siblings to an extent, and so I think that's another area where they were trying to chart a different path.
It's a very
Which,
empathetic response from them, right? They see that like this experience I had was hard.
yeah.
I don't want that for my own kids, and they're going to
Mhm.
try to change, right? Try to make it different. And that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
It's beautiful, and I think something I really came to appreciate in talking to them and talking to all their siblings and their parents to the extent that I could is that, I think a lot of us, we have that instinct to like correct for the mistakes or sins of our parents. There's the
Right.
stuff that they did that we didn't like, and we're like, oh, I don't want to.
I'll never be like my dad,
Never
like
be
all
like that,
that.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty hard. And at the end of the day, we are a lot of us. We tend to reflect the people who raise us, whoever that is, and I'm certainly no exception. But what I think is interesting in my parents is, in talking to my father in particular, he was so determined not to get divorced.
Mhm.
And he really kind of clung pretty hard to the idea of us staying together as a family, because he did not want to repeat, that experience of his own childhood. But what I've come to appreciate in hearing his story and reflecting on my own experience is that ultimately he did repeat the cycle. He did get divorced, but that didn't mean he had to recreate, those same experiences that were so traumatic for him. And
Yeah.
so even within that, it's just a way in which it's just a reminder that we should allow ourselves that latitude to both, repeat and recreate, the models and experiences that were given to us, but also to like within that also find our own way and make it our own and do better in
Yeah.
whatever in whatever way better means.
Yeah.
And I feel like looking at my parents, they did that.
Mm. Yeah. There's always wiggle room. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about, like, I've thought about this a lot, at least early on in my marriage, which is thinking about, oh, am I going to become like my dad, right? And my dad, was a really, I don't have a relationship with him anymore, but like just a really hard guy to be around. Very violent, very scary, sort of a tyrant in a lot of ways. And so, and just the way he treated my mom.
Yeah.
Right. So going into my marriage, and I started my marriage at a place where I still really had a lot of work to do on myself, right? And so I did have fear and anxiety about like, am I gonna make the same mistakes that he did, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's to your point, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, right? Like that doesn't mean like I am going to be a sort of a cheater for 30
Mm.
years or whatever. Like that doesn't mean that. It's not a one-to-one thing. But it is important to be aware of sort of like how, the reality is I am my dad and mom's kid, and there are certain aspects of them that have come to me, and
Right.
awareness about them doesn't mean I'm going to make those same decisions. It could mean that, right? But I think there's always wiggle room and a great deal of like self-compassion needed
Mhm.
throughout that sort of navigation process,
Yeah, I think the key word for me that you used is awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I think about how I relate with the ways that my ancestors are, to me, it doesn't feel productive just like to be like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be like that. That I can't just sort of like force myself to be a different way, but just by being aware, by like, when I do something, when I have an impulse, just to be able to be aware, oh, okay, this is a behavior that I learned from someone else, and that I'm carrying a little piece of them, and I can act on that, or maybe I can try and channel it a different way.
Exactly. Pattern behavior. Yeah.
But just to learn, and it's a lifelong, project.
Totally.
It's not something that you ever, you finished. You've mapped out the blueprint of yourself and how it relates with the material that you're drawn from. But you just keep learning and finding. And I think it's funny how the rituals of life, they kind of like bring these things out in new ways. And I think marriage is one. And it sounds like for you, maybe marriage was a difficult one, and of like grappling with the way you would be a husband or partner with respect to the way your father was. I don't know if you have children, but I feel like I don't, but my family members who have children, I think that is for many people a real moment of reckoning.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to parent like their parents parented? And, so it's like that learning is never done, as we wind our way through life, we like continue to encounter some of the same things that our forebears encountered, and have to, and maybe we respond to them the same way or differently.
You said you don't have kids. Do you want to have kids someday?
This is something that has always been something of an open question for my partner and I. When we decided to get married, neither of us felt. I think for a lot of people, marriage is tied to childbearing and child rearing. Like they get married because they want to have kids, and that feels like a necessary prerequisite or something.
Right.
And that was not the case for us. We decided to get married because we felt like we wanted to plan a life together and like be able to think like a few years down the road and build a home together, and just do that with a degree of confidence that we both meant it and that we were both committed to this.
Yeah.
That's what, that's so much of what it meant to us. And so the question of whether or not we'd have children is always an open one. And I'm honestly not sure that we ever will.
Yeah.
My life is feeling pretty full. And I mean, I feel like that's a whole huge conversation. We could spend plenty of time down there of, what reproduction and creating life or raising life means, and why some are drawn to it and some are not. But
well, I was curious because you mentioned it, and I think you're right. I think it's another one of those sort of boxes you check as a married person, right? And I think that's problematic. It's interesting because I haven't really talked about this on the show. Early on, Jessica and I think we did want to have kids. We were married, I guess, in our late 20s. I'm 40 now. She's 40. We're both 40. And we're like, oh yeah, like that should be the plan. Like that would be great. That would be fun. And as we sort of went through our stuff and work, working and continue to be working on our own traumas and going to therapy and working together on therapy and just becoming more aware and actualize and figuring out like what our passions are, like as we do that work and as we sort of work in our own careers and things like that. It had just become, it sort of transitioned from like, we'll have kids someday to like, I don't know if we'll have kids.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how that came to be. And I think, if I'm being honest, I think the early sort of desire to have kids was like stemming from the place of like, oh, it's what you do.
Right.
Right. And I don't think that's fair or honest.
Yeah.
Right. So, and we did give it sort of the good college try at one point for a spell, but it didn't happen for whatever reason. And now we're
Yeah.
at the point where, my wife is a community college English teacher. She's getting her doctorate. I work forever all the time. And so I don't know if it's reasonable to do so or even fair, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear your account of that. I feel like so we're just a few years younger than you.
Gotcha.
I'm 33, and
Mhm.
so we're right in that age when I feel like a lot of our peers, immediate age peers, are looking to have kids, or it's that sort of biological moment when
Mhm.
a lot of people look to make that happen. So and yeah, I do see a lot of people drawn to it as not that it's like unthinking, but that it is sort of the next thing you do. And yeah, we've put a lot of thought into whether or not it's the next thing that we want to do. And at the moment, it's not.
Yeah, that's fair. I love it. So, Ian, we haven't really explored like relationship on this show much, and I'm curious from you as someone who's, just released this project, Forever is a Long Time, and have been thinking about sort of divorce and relationships and what does it mean, and reflecting on your own marriage and relationship. Like, if you're speaking to maybe the listeners, the Feely humans out there, like what would you say is like some of the things that you've learned about, in your own marriage, like what you've learned to be sort of like, oh, these are some like very helpful things to like make sort of a healthy, sort of growing relationship operate?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to present myself as any kind of expert in anything other than the marriages and relationships of my own family. But I'm
Understood.
happy to speak from that experience and whatever insight that can offer. I feel like so much of what I learned and was sort of drawn to in the stories of hearing these stories of my relatives um, is in some ways less about their decision to get divorced, although those decisions are very interesting and powerful. But I was really fascinated by what drew them, why they wound up with the people they did, and then chose to marry those people.
Hmm.
Um, and I think maybe my assumption, it seems like maybe a foolish assumption now, is that at some point those must have been really great, strong relationships, founded on mutual respect and admiration and love and support. And then somewhere along the way, something went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and I think that was a source of great anxiety for me, seeing because even it sort of gave me this feeling of like things look good, but who knows, maybe a year or 2 years or 5 years, like something's just going to give.
Right.
It's going to break at some point. But then in actually delving into these stories, I was kind of fascinated to learn that the relationships that they ultimately chose to build their marriages on were really troubled, and from the start felt unbalanced or poorly communicated,
Hmm.
and and yet they sort of drifted along with it, or allowed themselves to be drawn into it. And so that you mentioned earlier, just the meaning, power of just like choice and
Mm-hmm.
being deliberate in your life. um and I think this is partly a generational thing for people of my parents and grandparents generation. It's so easy to, or it certainly was, and I think it is still so easy to find yourself in a relationship, not really by intention or design, but just by circumstance, and
Yep.
to, I don't know, to just feel like that's your only choice, and to just drift along with it, following one kind of inevitable stepping stone after another. You move in, you get married, you have a child, and then suddenly, at some point, it can't hold, right? And so I think one of my takeaways was actually a great deal of comfort in the fact that, oh wow, like when at least at the time that I got married, I did actually do it out of a sense of real like care and admiration and longing to spend my life with this person. So, okay, we're off to a decent start, all things considered. But also just, a reminder that, yeah, we can always, we always just have so much more control over our lives than we allow ourselves. I think, in that.
How do you mean about that? The control piece?
I just mean, it's easy to feel like a relationship, for example, is just like the only relationship, your only option. And I just feel like, oh, it would be so much work to like, to try and change this, or it's easy to just sort of go with the status quo and trust that it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And it's hard to change, but we do actually have that power to change our own relationships and our own lives. And so I think, I mean, I don't know how to frame this as advice necessarily that, is actionable, but I do feel like, the finding a way to really, really take a hard look at, the choices you made for your life, where you live, the daily routines you set for yourself, the relationship and partner that you choose. Yeah, it's easy to just let these things happen to you rather than choosing them. And I think that's so much of, what I learned in the stories of my family.
Yeah.
They sort of let marriage happen to them and let relationships happen to them until it couldn't work anymore. And then they got divorced.
Yeah. And I think there's a generational sort of intersectionality at play. I think you're right about that. And also just like we make the choices that we think we deserve, right? Like we'll stay in a thing because we feel like we deserve it, or maybe we feel like we don't deserve anything beyond that, right? There's a lot there's insecurity at play, there's self-esteem and anxiety and all these things, right? I was listening to an episode of We Can Do Hard Things, Glennon Doyle's podcast. I'm a big fan of Glennon Doyle, and they were talking about brave. They were talking about sort of the word brave and what it means. Yeah. And ultimately, they came to the conclusion that brave is sort of following your internal knowing, right? Mm-hmm. And that is hard. That is hard. They gave an example of this woman who called in and basically said, we were at this sort of like park place, and there was this big rock where everyone jumped into this lake, right? Yep. And this little boy who was like 9 or something was on top of the rock. The rest of the family, including the mother who called in, was at the bottom, and they were like saying, come on, jump. Yeah. And Glennon was like, well, what if he doesn't? What if his internal knowing is, and the brave choices say, no, right. I'm cool. Like, you don't need to force me into, they were talking about sort of like the patriarchal sort of view of what brave means and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was very good and fascinating. But like, that's what it comes down to me, and what's ultimately hard in any sort of long-term relationship, which is we have to keep following that internal knowing, and intrinsically, we're going to change. Right. Like I have, and I'm curious to hear how you've changed, but like I have changed. I've been married for 11 years. so much over the past decade, right? And Jessica and me vice versa, has to be present and aware and cognizant and having a conversation about those changes and what they mean to me and what they mean to her, and in support, in love, in curiosity, like all of it, right? And that piece is hard because we marry a person and we have this idea that like, oh, this is going to be the person who's going to be with me forever, right? But that person will change, and that's a weird, hard realization, you know?
Yeah, and nothing is fixed. It's like they're going to change and you're going to change.
Yep.
And yet the idea that that relationship or bond between you somehow remains fixed between these 2 points that are moving independently. I mean, it's, as I said before, in some ways it's like kind of wild that we even expect that of ourselves.
Totally.
And it's still strange to me. I mean, it is even just, marriage aside, but just the idea that like you have a partner in life and that, you have a single romantic partner that is sort of like the foundation of your household. And, you like that as sort of like the basic unit of society is like just one assumption. And it's very pervasive, obviously. And obviously, I've bought into it. It sounds like you have to an extent as well, and that's fine. That's the journey that we're on. But it's I don't know. It's not the journey that everyone's on, you know. And I think I still have to remind myself of that. That it's really not the only path.
It's so important to remind ourselves of that, right? Because like we get in our frames of sort of belief and identity, and then we start to think that it's the right way when we just bought into one of them. You know, like if someone like has a polyamorous sort of framework, or etc. Right? There are tons of them. No one way is right or wrong, right? Like, I think moralizing these decisions is problematic, right?
Right. Yeah. One of my aunts who I interviewed, I was really fascinated to do this interview because she was the only person whose former partner I never knew. They divorced around the time I was born, actually. She married quite young. And divorced fairly early. And so it was this real kind of mysterious figure. And it was partly fascinating to me because this aunt has always been just so independent and has really for most of my lifetime never had a partner. And in talking with her, I mean, that was like a discovery about herself that took her a long time to make. When she was young, she was devout Catholic. She was married in the Catholic Church. And at the time of her divorce, it was really like very torn up about it that, she had taken those vows and she meant them. And, she knew it would put her outside the bounds of the church. And like she carried that very heavily. But in finally shedding that relationship, and it was, difficult and it was hard for the relationship was unhealthy for her in a lot of ways, but when she finally moved beyond that, I mean, she started to get this awareness that she was really okay just being by herself, and that and she's since had a really remarkable life. And I think about the way she's lived in like a lot of different places. She hasn't lived just in one place. And she now actually lives with one of her sisters. They have this wonderful house together. She's traveled a lot. She's written fiction. She has a tremendous career, and she just chose to, like, after that, that point in her early life, to just not build her life around another person, and to really build it around her own needs, and that's worked out really well for her. And I find it kind of inspiring.
It is inspiring. Yeah.
But I'd never really understood like what it took for her to get to that point.
Right. That's great.
Because I think it takes a real like sense of self to be able to say, I'm okay just doing me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially the pressure that women feel, right? To be like, oh, your sort of place in the world is to like be by a man, right? Like there's that whole cultural nonsense that is taking place. Yeah, no, that's very courageous on her part.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I mean that the gendered aspect you raise is of course present in, you know, all the interviews I did and all the stories, you know. I think how the men and women in my family experience marriage and divorce is very different. And in almost every case, it is the woman who ultimately, you know, the women in my family who ultimately initiate those divorces.
Interesting.
And I think it was good for them.
Yeah. What is your take on that? You know, this fact that all the women initiated it.
It's funny in sharing the stories with my wife, Kelsey. We sort of got to the end and we were reflecting on that reality, and she was like, "Well, I mean, marriage is an institution of the patriarchy, so it's probably going to work better for men than women, and the men are going to be more okay with staying in it." She had a very
good insight,
very straightforward assessment of it. And I think there's a great deal of truth to that. I mean, one of the things I've like mindful of after doing all these interviews is to not, you know, is that every relationship truly does live and die on its own terms. And that as much as I approach this set of relationships as sort of a group, and I'm interested in sort of looking across them, that they're also, every story has really specific circumstances, and those, you know, could be mental health issues or financial issues or the impact of children, health, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But
it's hard.
Yeah, so there's, you know, obviously different things going on in every story, but I do think, especially for the period of time, you know, the generations that, you know, I was documenting in this project, people who got married in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, that is really a period in which I think for a lot of women, including the women in my family, divorce was just a really powerful and relatively new option.
Yeah.
For getting out of relationships that weren't good for them.
I would be curious to sort of see you know, like a season 2, you know, 20 years later or something with like a new generation of humans, right? That would be, because you're right. Like, I think like we are in the, you know, maybe we're in the sort of the generation where that's the sort of the institution piece is sort of crumbling away a little bit. And 20 years from now, you know, maybe, I don't know, robots are probably taking over the world, but you know, who knows what marriage will look like.
Be married.
Robot marriage, yeah.
I'm actually really interested in that question of you know, I don't didn't study the statistics, but as I understand it, you know, divorce rates have declined, you know, since sort of a peak around the 90s or something. And that millennials, my generation, you know, by the numbers, looks like our marriages are lasting longer, but it also seems very kind of too soon to say.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I'll be really interested to see if 10, 20, 30 years down the line, how marriages in my generation do play out. If and obviously me, like so many other of my peers, approached the whole thing very differently from my parents and many of my parents' generation. We dated for a long time. We lived together.
Mm-hmm.
Before we got married, I think we, approached, we were thinking about the institution of marriage quite differently than they were. Certainly in the case of my family. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that, if in the long run, that helps us to build long-term, healthy, productive relationships, or if, I don't know, we run into some of the same challenges that they did.
I'll keep leaning into the pursuit of awareness, empathy, compassion, open communication, honesty, all that stuff, and that stuff gets you far.
It does.
I find. Yeah. So Forever is a Long Time is available anywhere you can listen to podcasts, etc.
Yep. Wherever people are listening to this podcast right now, presumably they should be able to search for Forever is a Long Time.
And do you have plans for like a season 2, or like what is it? Obviously it was very specific, this sort of run of episodes, but just curious.
Yeah, it's something I've thought about. It was always created as a limited kind of defined series.
Yeah.
Or that was always my intent. But I have thought about whether I would want to revisit this subject, either within the context of my family. There is sort of a new generation of us wading into these same waters of marriage. My brother is married. I have one other cousin who's married. It would be I've entertained the notion of maybe recording some more interviews and seeing what other perspectives I could bring to this question, or maybe even reaching outside my family. But
yeah,
at the moment, I'm giving myself a break from divorce stories.
Sounds good. I love it. Well, listeners, make sure to go search for Forever is a Long Time. It's fantastic. And the links to the show also will be at feelyhuman.co. Ian, let's talk about our empathy heroes. How does that sound?
That sounds like a great idea.
All right. So every week I talk about someone in my life, could be even a character from a story I love, musician, whatever. Someone who's just empathetic, compassionate, feely, etc. I'll go first to give you a second to think about yours.
Okay, great.
My empathy hero this week is Lovey Jones, who's a new Instagram follow, and she's at LUVVIE on Instagram. And I'm just bringing up this post that I'll share in the show notes, but it's wonderful. And the first sort of piece of it, she quotes this. She says, "When I see successful white men tell people that their path to success was about their hard work and getting up at 5 a.m. or whatever, quote, millionaire habits they decide to share with us, I side-eye." And then it's just a string of wonderfully eloquent, very accurate take on men, white men in particular, in business and sort of hustle culture and toxic masculinity. And Lovey Jones is a wonderful follow. Again, she is at LUVVIE on Instagram. She's wonderful. She's my empathy hero this week. How about you?
My empathy hero this week. My empathy hero right now is, I don't know if this counts or not, but my dog is...
Of course it counts. Dogs are the number one empathy heroes of all time.
Cha-Cha. And I'm just constantly amazed by the degree to which this other life form is so tuned in to me. And she's just like, to me and to my wife. And just like her presence and awareness is, and to be fair, she has her own anxieties and neuroses and her own work to do. But in a few minutes, or whenever we sign off, I'm gonna like click a little switch on the back of my recording interface to sort of shut it off for the night. And as soon as I do that, she's gonna run in and come scratching at the door because she knows that I'm done and it's time to go to the park or do something else. And she's just she's always tuned in to other people, not just herself. And it's a reminder for me.
Yeah. Dogs are the best. I am a dog person. We have a rescue named Maddie, and the love of my life, Scooby, died in April. Our black lab. He was 14. Thank you. Just the way you described Cha-Cha. Cha-Cha is the name?
Cha-Cha.
Just, like dogs are present. They remind us of sort of our own fallibilities. They're pure love and joy, and they're always welcome on You Me Empathy. I mean, if I had to change the title of this podcast, it would be You Me Dogs. I mean, I would do it in a heartbeat.
You Me Dogs and Empathy.
There you go. Yeah. Just keep the serial comma going. Okay. Well, Ian, where can the Feely humans out there connect with you and learn more about all the wonderful work you're doing in the world?
I would say the two best places are either I have a website where I try to post stuff that I'm working on, shows I'm making, music I'm making. It's iancoss.com. Just my full name, IANCOSS.com. And then you can also follow me on Twitter, which is probably where I'm most active, at Ian_Coss.
Great. Well, listeners, those links will be in the show notes for this episode at feelyhuman.co. Ian, thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful.
Thank you. It was a real treat.
Likewise. And to you listeners, as I always say, I'm here, you're here, we're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring, pale blue dot. We have each other. It's You Me Empathy.